morning and good welcome to this week. I don't know, good welcome. Well, today it's interesting. We're going to be touching on the topic of good and evil. So I guess good welcome to this week. Better, much better than evil welcome to this week. We're going to really hit today on just the existence of evil or the problem of evil, kind of what is evil, and defining it a little bit today, and then we're going to go into that a little more deeper as we get through our week. But this really is something that we're facing every day. I would say, if you were to ask or put it on a scale of 1 to 10, what, how much does evil influence your daily life? How much does the existence of evil influence your daily life? And I think you'd probably be surprised if you start to really measure it out, how much it does in just the scale of, you know, making decision making, making decision making, of making decisions of whether or not you do this or that based on whether one is considered a good decision or a bad decision, a right decision or a wrong decision. And that's where evil enters in. It's on a, we have a scale. And so if we're looking incrementally at how much does it influence our everyday life, probably substantially would be a good guess. And sometimes, some days, more than others. Do we feel evil? How do we perceive evil? Uh, does evil even really exist is a question that we have to answer. May not be a question that we ask, but it has been asked, and so we need to answer and we need to define it because we're going to go outside and people are using different criteria in which they determine the existence or the the value of evil. What is evil? And certainly some people have different perceptions of what that is. You know, some people will say this is evil, and other people will cheer it on. I remember watching this news broadcast of a decision or a executive order that was being signed by the governor of New York that was going to allow for abortions to be performed up until the moment of birth. And as the governor signed this order, people started cheering. What are you cheering for? I mean, really, what are you cheering for? And so some would question whether or not that's a good thing. Those cheering would say that's a good thing. And a lot of people would say that's downright evil. And so there is a question of how do we perceive evil? How do we measure it? Who determines what's evil and what's good? So we're going to try and tackle that this week. It should be an interesting journey that we go on each day as we take it a step closer. But let's dive in now. Let me see here. So let's dive in. I want to just start with some statistics of what people think regarding evil. So I'm going to pop this up here on the screen. Uh, most of the look at this. Most Americans say that suffering in the world comes from people, not God. So if you were to ask where the origin of evil comes from, most Americans would agree that it doesn't come from God. What's interesting about this uh, survey is, one, you've got this inclusive of all U.S. adults, okay, and then it breaks it down by religious categories. But on the bottom, you see the note that says roughly 1 in 10 respondents say they do not believe in God or a higher power of any kind. And they were not asked these. Okay, so if we just looked at that reality, that 10% of the people that responded to this survey don't believe in God, then the next question is, well, if they don't believe in God, who defines what evil is? So 10% of people wouldn't find their definition from the same origin as we would. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more, where from the biblical perspective, we have a very clear place in which evil originates. And we'll look at that. And then that's measurable, so that we'll see that in a little bit too. So let's go on to another statistic. Oh, by the way, it was kind of interesting to just see how that all rolled out. But all U.S. adults, among all U.S. adults, 80% of people did not blame God for evil in the world. And then we had among the Christian population, the highest portion being to the evangelicals and the Catholics, and others dropping slightly lower. So that's kind of interesting. But all of them above the 80 percentile mark of all U.S. adults. So um, here's also along that, God chooses not to stop the suffering as one reason why it exists, is that he allows it to exist. Another one, Satan is responsible for that. Look at the percentage there. 44% of U.S. adults give credit to Satan for the existence of evil in the world. Among Christians, evangelicals being the highest at 73%, and the lowest being Catholics at 43%, assigning Satan as the one for whom most evil exists. And then sometimes suffering makes me doubt that God is all powerful. Okay, so among all the participants there is always, and this is just interesting, even though it goes down among evangelicals to only 5%, there are always some that are caused to question and doubt God's ability or power to overcome evil because of the continued persistence of uh, suffering in the world. And then sometimes suffering makes me doubt that God is entirely loving. So if he is able to stop it, why doesn't he stop it? And then that raises the question of whether or not he's actually a loving God, or entirely loving, or God is love, as John says it. And then we look at the last one. Sometimes I think the suffering in the world is the indication that there is no God. And so, of course, the highest percentile there would be among U.S. adults. And then we do see a high portion of historically black Christians that would also be caused to question that. But everyone is in the same boat there. That it just brings that question to bear. So is in the question of, does evil exist? Why does it exist? How do we feel about its existence? And what does that mean about God? Does God allow it? Is God unable to stop it? If God is able to stop it and doesn't it, is he loving? And if he's able, if evil exists, does God exist? So all good questions that are worth asking and should be asked. And we should actually work toward trying to discover and understand and be able to communicate the answer to these questions. So here I want to move on to another statistic here. Pull that up here again. All right, so what do Americans feel when they hear about human suffering? So if we were to see evil as probably something that's felt primarily through some sort of suffering, if that's how it becomes manifest or known to us, then what do we feel when we hear about that suffering? So like what do you feel when you see the news that comes out of Ukraine, and you hear about the loss of life that happens there, or a shooting that happens in some part of the country, or a person that is struggling or fighting cancer, or a family that's in dysfunction and broken? How do we understand all of this suffering that exists around us, and what do we feel when we hear about it? So among once again, this is all U.S. adults, Christian and non-Christian alike, 71% of those that, when they hear about suffering, are thankful for, I guess, their own lack of suffering, for the things that they have that are positive and good, and that they measure as good. many, 62%, experience a sadness, a profound sadness for those who are suffering. And so their heart goes out to them. There's a desire to help. So a smaller portion actually have a desire to respond and assist people who are going through the suffering. And then the need to tune out the news or just kind of ignore the suffering because it kind of hurts is a smaller portion, about a quarter of people. And then need to make changes in your own life so that you don't end up in a similar situation, to so as to further avoid it, not only to not hear about it but to not experience it, 20%. And then worry that something similar will happen to you, to take up a concern, or in this case it says worry, so that sounds like even deeper than just a concern as to uh, that this may occur, to something that's more of an anxiety issue. And that's 12%. And happy if the person seems to have deserved it. So if there's suffering that comes, and you think, hey, they had it coming to them, then there's a certain amount of pleasure involved. Isn't that kind of weird that we find pleasure, almost a sadistic type of experience there? But it runs the whole gamut, doesn't it? So it starts out there where the first response seems to be one of thankfulness for, man, I'm glad I don't have to go through that, or I'm so thankful that I have this. So if say it's knowing of someone who's going through cancer, thankful that for one's health, or knowing of a family that's struggling and broken, thankful for one's family members within which you have good relations. And these are good and positive responses, I think. Healthy responses is to be reflective and thankful for that. What interested me about this was that the percentage seemed to really decrease. And so that when you get to that next one, sadness for those, so you feel gratitude, but you have no sadness for those. It doesn't. So a certain portion of people, it does not evoke a response of compassion or sadness that sympathizes with them in what they're enduring. And then furthermore, even if you have the sadness, it doesn't move one to necessarily want to help that person. Those are challenging. So I wonder, here's going a little bit further. How much does evil influence us in those decision makings, that we're just thankful that we don't have to, that's not us, and we're ready to just move on. And then we even want to do some escapism or avoidance, and push that to the side, or not hear about it, so as not to have that further influence us or move us toward any sort of reaction that would provide care to people who are in suffering. So then the question is the evil found its sort of resonance in me, in my unwillingness to want to help people? Challenging, then. Challenging, isn't it? All right, so then let's go on. I've got one more statistic I want to share with you, and here we go with this one. Let's pop that up big. When asked to explain suffering, majority of U.S. adults say that sometimes bad things just happen. So this is where we get to the whole question of, well, how do we perceive evil? How does it influence us? And is evil even real? And maybe it's just stuff happens, stuff happens. And so among respondents, U.S. adults, sometimes bad things just happen. Very well or somewhat well, respondents, 44 or 42%, or 86% overall. Suffering is mostly a consequence of people's own actions, so they get what's coming to them, or they deserve it. That's 22% feel strongly toward that, and 49% kind of, and then the other parts were no. Suffering is mostly a result of the way society is structured, so it's just kind of a part of our circumstances. It's just kind of what we stuck with it. 19% and 50% with regard to that. So still a pretty decent 69% feeling that way. And then to provide an opportunity for people to come out stronger so that we go through these things because, hey, no pain, no gain. If we go through these things, maybe it'll help us in the long run. And there's some biblical connection to that too from Paul's writing to the Corinthian church, where he says we comfort others with the same comfort we ourselves have received. And so, yeah, we can pass it on to others by our experience in having gone through this. We can help others in their experiences. So here's, from a philosophical standpoint, one of the great influencers of this is a man by the name of Friedrich Nietzsche. And he was of the position that evil does not actually even exist. But he would say, rather, human beings project their own subjective disapproval onto events and actions. And it's amazing to me how much a philosopher can impact society and steer the thought processes of many other people. And so Nietzsche is one of those that has been very influential among a wide audience. And his philosophy here, or his position that evil doesn't actually exist, it's non-existent, but that it's just a projection of our own subjective feelings onto our conditions or circumstances or other people. I think that that's stupid. Can I just say I think that's stupid? This person leaves room for anything goes. If evil is not real and there is no measurement of right or wrong, good or bad, anything goes. And our laws are just a social construct determined by people that have no real moral implications toward us. Okay, so morality ceases to exist. In fact, Friedrich Nietzsche would really go so far as to say God is dead. So if you want to look at the movies that feature the Newsboys and that whole series, God's Not Dead, here's the inspiration. He's the guy that would say God is dead. And he would advocate for the fact that evil is just something we imagine. I just want to go back to my original statement. That's stupid. Now, people will say you're not allowed to say that. I say I am. I'm the one that's got the mic. I'm the one that's got the camera. So I can say whatever I want at this point. And here I'm going to back it up a little bit, just with Hollywood. Now, I don't use Hollywood a lot to back up certain things, but there was this really good movie. I thought it was a good movie called The Day After Tomorrow. Interesting movie that features a climate change scenario where the extreme temperatures, extreme weather conditions resulting from the climate change start to occur, and there's some fantastic storms that impact the world. And North America in particular features this scene from New York City where a cold front has come, a superstorm has settled on northern North America, and it's not like you go outside and get frostbite. Freezing conditions drop so much that it actually freezes fuel. So it's extreme. And there's a scene where they find themselves taking refuge in the middle of this storm in the library in downtown New York City. And as they're sheltering there, this one police officer comes up with this brilliant idea of realizing that there's people that are walking outside, that they're moving outside, and they're probably going south. So it's extreme cold. The city's frozen. It's uninhabitable, really. They're just kind of finding shelter wherever and keeping as warm and safe as possible. And they see these people moving outside, and they decide it's time for them to try and make their getaway and try and start moving south. But they got to walk because there's no longer roads available or transportation. So they're going to have to walk it. The one star character tries to convince the whole group because he's been in contact with his father, who's a climatologist, and he's trying to convince them not to go, just to hunker down and stay warm. If they go outside, they will die, and they're divided, and a portion stays and a portion leaves. And what happens in the movie is that portion that leaves, this is your spoiler alert, that portion that leaves, it doesn't listen to the warning, it doesn't heed that concern that star character is providing. They go out and they all die. They freeze to death. So they followed that was a wrong decision. See, there was a right and a wrong. There was a good and a bad. There was evil that existed in terms of the circumstances that they were going into. What is just an aside? They're in the library and they start burning books, and there's a discussion that takes place, and they're arguing over this one book of whether they should burn it or not. And it's Nietzsche. I thought that was interesting. Friedrich Nietzsche there. Makes an appearance in The Day After Tomorrow as a star book, something to be saved. But here's an example of given two options, two directions. One will ultimately save life, and the other one will lose it. One will be good, and one will be bad. One will be right, and one will be wrong. And to just kind of dismiss that, as Nietzsche does, and say that they're just subjective measurements, doesn't take into account the tangible effect and consequences that follow these. So we want to look a little deeper at this from a biblical perspective. Now we're talking origin, and we're making a certain assumption here regarding this. And the first assumption is that God is real. God is not dead, as Nietzsche would suppose, and also that his word is authoritative and true. And so as we go into that word, we're going to find a history, or also as we get into Genesis, which is a book of origins, we're going to find the origination of evil as it actually comes into the world. So those things are assumptions that we're making, that we have to be clear on. This is what we believe, and this is why we turn here for this reason. Okay, now from Genesis chapter 3, we get, this is the story. Adam and Eve have been created. They've been settled into the garden. They've been commissioned to carry on the stewardship of the planet and of the garden and caring for it. And they've only been given one thing that they're not supposed to do. So this is their command that God gives them. He says, don't eat from that tree that's in the middle of the garden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Any other tree you can have, anything else you can eat, you can do with what you want, but that tree, don't touch it. Don't even touch it, or you'll die. Okay, so very clear instructions regarding that. And then all that's involved is if they are obedient, they'll know only good. But disobedience, we'll use that as the first definition of evil, is disobedience. Okay, so the first definition of evil would be disobedience. So that's been defined here. Do this, good. Do that, bad. Do this, you'll live. Do that, you'll die. Just like in The Day After Tomorrow. Make this choice or that choice. This is how it will be. And here's how it goes. Now the serpent was more crafty than the other beasts of the field that the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, did God actually say, you shall not eat of any tree in the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden. But God said, "You shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die." But the serpent said to the woman, "You will not surely die." Hmm. Good or bad? Right or wrong? Evil. There's evil right there in the temptation, the lie that is being perpetrated by the serpent. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. And she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. So there's a lot of bad choices there. Among those, I would say sewing fig leaves together to make loincloths. That was lame. Let's call that lame. Not the best material. I can't imagine that being extremely comfortable, nor durable. Extremely durable. But why was that necessary? It was because there was a consequence that they experienced immediately. They knew evil. Evil had exposed itself in their conscience. They immediately knew that they had disobeyed God. They had been warned, don't do this, don't do that. And they did what they were not supposed to do. That was evil. That was wrong. That was disobedient. And as a result, they got, like what the one statistic said, they got what was coming to them. Got what God had promised would happen as a result. So here's how evil is defined. The word evil that first appears there in Genesis chapter 2, and then again in chapter 3 as the account of their fall from grace is retold, is the word ra. It means bad or evil, meaning either natural or moral. So in this case, it would be a moral decision of disobedience that they had made. But it could also be descriptive. The word can also be used of natural evils. That would be the consequence of their decision, which is death. That is now the natural consequence. Before that, there was no death. Now there would be. The word evil, ra, comes from another word, a primitive root word, rea, which means to spoil, literally breaking to pieces. And so this was the breaking of that relationship that they had of trust and obedience to God. Figuratively, it means to make or be good for nothing. And so what was good was now good for nothing. It had turned bad. It had spoiled. It was physically, socially, or morally corrupted. And that's what evil is. So when we look at evil, we're going to just draw this conclusion. Evil is real. It exists. And it has tangible values attached to it. That means that it's measurable. We can determine it based on, one, it's just either black and white, like obedience, disobedience, or we can see it also from the tangible effects or consequences, life and death. So it's measurable in that way. And then because we have such black and white things, we also have that incremental in between space. Sometimes it's that gray space we see between right and wrong where we don't know quite what to do, what decision to make. What's the right decision? And we're trying to weigh out what the consequence will be, life or death, or good or bad, whether profitable or unprofitable. And so that space in between there can be filled with things like sickness or difficulty or challenges that otherwise we would not have known. So this is where it becomes very measurable and tangible. In fact, so tangible is it that I brought you to the first place in which evil is spoken of, its origination. Let's go ahead from the Alpha, then go to the Omega, and from the beginning go also to the end. The last place that evil is spoken about in the Bible is from Revelation chapter 22. And here it says, "Let the evildoer still do evil, and the filthy still be filthy, and the righteous still do right, and the holy still be holy. Behold, I'm coming soon, bringing my recompense with me to repay each one for what he has done." In other words, evil has a weight to it, and it's what its weight is will be measured back accordingly. And this is what God has promised is in store. Now, thankfully, as I don't want to conclude this with just you're going if you have a glimmer of evil, I don't know, glimmer. No, glimmer is not the right word. A shadow of evil, a darkness about you, a recess in your mind which has held things in store that you don't want to bring out necessarily for everyone to see. If anything like that exists in your life, you have this to worry about. I don't want to leave you there. God, who has loved us from the beginning, has not forsaken us. So while this decision was made between life and death, or obedience and disobedience, he cast us out. He gave us the consequence of that decision, and every generation has borne with that consequence. And we continue to see the evidence of it. But he has not forsaken us. He's not left us alone. So he continued to love us even through this, what we call the valley of the shadow of death right here, the vale of tears of this life. And he continues to go with us, so much so that not only did he stay with us in spirit, but he sent himself, his son, to bear on human flesh and to take our evil, our sins upon himself, to bear our evil in his body, to experience the consequence of our evil through his death, so that we might have the benefits of his righteousness and his life as we put our trust in him. So when it comes to this final judgment, and God gives to each one as they deserve, we do not trust in our merits, but we trust in his. And we put our hope and confidence in Jesus, who gave his life not only for us, but gave his life to us. And this is what we have to look forward to. So I want to just leave you with that good thought. As you go out, you're going to face some evil today. I'm sure it's going to have its influence. But remember, you also go with a very good God. I like this phrase. It comes from the movie God's Not Dead. God is good all the time, and all the time, God is good. Peace be with you. Have a good day, as we will look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.